Good evening, everyone. My name is Dina Romero, and I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People, Communities and Culture. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all and to thank you for joining us this evening for our Holocaust Memorial Day commemoration, which we have organised in partnership with Bath Interfaith Group. I'd like to say thank you also to Bath Interfaith Group for their assistance. I would like to extend a special welcome tonight to Thomas Shepherd, the High Sheriff of Somerset, and the Right Worshipful, the Mayor of Bath, Councillor June Player. Holocaust Memorial Day takes place each year on the 27th of January, as many people across the UK and across the world come together for remembrance in a world scarred by genocide. Tonight we remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust, alongside the millions of other people killed under Nazi persecution and in the genocides that followed in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. The theme for Holocaust Memorial Day 2022 is One Day. And over the next hour, you will hear the testimony of our special guest and also have the chance to reflect while listening to music and poetry. By coming together here tonight to remember and reflect, we can also make a commitment to use every opportunity we have to tackle prejudice, discrimination and intolerance wherever we encounter it, so that there is a safer, better future for everyone. I'd now like to invite David Musgrave from Bath Interfaith Group to speak.
It's a great honour for me as chair of Bath Interfaith Group, once again, for us to be associated with this vitally important commemoration. Our aims include increasing understanding between the different faith communities. And so it is we join with those who remind us that understanding in the present day is worthless without sufficient understanding of the past. So this year's theme of One Day is an opportunity to focus. If we were each challenged to identify one day that meant most to us, we would have as many answers as there are participants. There might be the individual response, the birthday or anniversary of some other key point in a life. Religions have their key festivals, one day in the year where a central event is remembered and reflected on. And indeed, one of the most wonderful features of communities where different faiths live together in harmony is the way people share one another's celebrations. Then there are days marked by all countries of the world, United Nations Day, World AIDS Day, many others in which all people of goodwill are challenged to focus on their obligations towards our shared humanity. What then of days that are celebrated in the life of a nation? Remembrance Day, giving thanks perhaps for a victory over tyranny, but also focusing on the grief and suffering caused by war. In other countries, France with celebration of the revolution, or the United States, their Independence Day, can be more about glorifying a particular narrative than thinking of any downside to it. Empire Day, as it once was here in Britain, or Columbus Day in the Americas have evolved over time as previous narratives of supposed civilizing missions have been increasingly challenged. What then of refugees who have no prospect of returning to a place that they or their ancestors were forced to flee from? An annual day may be for them the moment to reflect on what has been lost. The day when they or their parents or their grandparents had their last sight of the village in which they had been born. A moment of yearning and hoping against hope for a better future. To come back then towards the specific theme of today, the one day may be the moment of grappling with conscience. The silent majority who in so many cases pretended not to see what was happening around them, literally keeping their heads down. Was that the day when I stood up to be counted? Or will I live with the shame of inaction for the rest of my life? Was I one of the good men who, according to Edmund Burke, did nothing and so allowed evil to flourish? Even as we will shortly hear about one particular such day, so must we constantly be reminded of our duty to one another. I'm often reminded of a very famous poem from Martin Niemöller, a German Protestant theologian who shared that post-war guilt in Germany of those who had not stood up at the time they were most needed. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. The same goes for us in Britain. There's no exceptionalism about our community. Recent years have made us realize that nowhere is safe. Human selfishness and a sense of self-preservation, together with the ability to blur a sense of truth and honesty, are the same in Britain and the US as anywhere else. Ensuring that we meet that one-day challenge when it comes requires constant vigilance, emphasizing our common humanity rather than the otherness of different communities. At best, our faith communities can propel us in that direction. At worst, they can lead to further division. But the responsibility lies on every individual to listen to their conscience and act when it is necessary to do so. I hope that we and others can be inspired by the testimony Christina Hilsenrath Craig is going to share with us about the one day in October 1938 that devastated the lives of her Polish Jewish grandparents and her mother, who came to England on the Kindertransport. Christina.
I hope I still have 2 to 3 months to live. It is very difficult to live in such conditions because death is constantly hanging over you. These lines were written in January 1943 by my grandfather, Christina Hilsenrath. Over 50 of his letters written during the Holocaust have survived. Drawing on these, my grandmother's photograph album and my mother's recollections, I'm going to tell you about the impact of the Holocaust on my mother and her parents, my grandparents. Their fate was not unusual, but their story is unique. So this is a very personal account. The one day that irrevocably changed their lives was 28th of October, 1938. This is their story. My grandfather, Christina Hilsenrath, was a Polish Jew. He was born in 1895 in a small town called Colombia. His large extended family had lived there for generations. Like many aspirant Eastern European Jews, Schulen went to Berlin in the early 1920s. There in 1924, he married Frieda Mieklin, a German Protestant. They opened a stationery and printing business. My mother, their only child, was born in Berlin in 1925. Life was good. They had a large apartment, the business prospered. They celebrated both Jewish and Christian holidays, and they could afford summer holidays. My mother remembers summers in Colombia with all her cousins, uncles and aunts, swimming in the river and eating wild strawberries. No photographs of these holidays have survived, but this is a photograph of my mother, Clara, aged 7, and her parents. It is taken in 1932 on Rügen Island off the Baltic coast of Germany. It looks idyllic, but all was not as it seems. Each hooded beach chair traditionally flew the flag of their city, but now many also flew the Nazi swastika. A few months later, in 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, and the persecution of Jews became an active policy. Being a prosperous, assimilated Jew was no protection. Daily life for Schulen, Frieda, and Clara changed dramatically. My mother remembered being isolated at school, insulted in the street, and ostracized by neighbors. From 1935, the law required her to go to a Jewish girls' school. Worst was to come. In 1936, Schulen was forced to give up his business. He was not allowed to work, so the family had no income. In 1937, their apartment was seized, and they were forced to move into a small rented apartment. Then in October 1938, the German Reich issued expulsion orders to Polish Jews living in Germany. This was the first organized and bureaucratically implemented mass expulsion of Jews from Germany. About 17,000 Jews from all over Germany were expelled on the weekend of the 27th and 28th of October in mass transports across the German-Polish border. This is a photograph of my mother on her 13th birthday, a confident teenager with her life ahead of her. The next day, Friday the 28th of October, the family were woken at 6:40 a.m. by the Gestapo pounding on the door. My grandfather, a Polish Jew, was arrested. He never saw his wife or daughter again. He was taken to the main railway station in Berlin, and with approximately 7,000 other men, women, and children, was taken by train to the border with Poland. From there, they were forced at gunpoint to walk through the forest until they reached the border town of Besztent in Poland. When they arrived, they found it was surrounded by the Polish army, who would not let them through into Poland. Many were held in Besztent for up to a year, stranded in makeshift facilities. My grandfather was one of the few who was allowed through to go back to the town of his birth, Colombia. Back in Berlin, the situation was now very dangerous for Clara and Frieda. Both were classified as Polish Jews, and their permission to stay in the Reich was also revoked. My mother was a priority for a place on the Kindertransport. She left Berlin alone by train late at night on the 12th of July, 1939. All she could take was a photograph of her parents and a few clothes in a tiny cardboard suitcase. The family are now separated in 3 different countries: Schulen in Poland, Frieda in Germany, and Clara in England. The only way they could communicate was by post. On 17th of July, Schulen wrote from Colombia to his daughter, Clara, care of the Movement for the Care of Children from Germany. His card was full of anxiety and concern. Let Daddy know where you are. Did you have a good journey? Were there lots of other children on the transport? Were you able to keep all of your things? Who picked you up from the station, or was nobody there? Back in Colombia, Schulen lived with his sister Esther, her husband Moses, and their 3 sons and daughter. Schulen wrote often to Frieda, reassuring her life was not too bad. But from June 1941, when the Germans invaded the Soviet Union and occupied the town, conditions rapidly changed. German military and police authorities were instructed to wage a war of annihilation against Jews, communists, Roma, and other persecuted groups. In Colombia, Beatings and individual murders were daily occurrences, as was confiscation of homes, furniture, clothing, and everything of value. Approximately 200 Jews were arrested on a daily basis. And then the mass killings, the Holocaust by bullets, started, carried out by the Einsatzgruppen, the mobile killing squads, often supported by local collaborators. The first mass extermination in Colombia was on the 12th of October, 1941. Over 3,000 Jews were taken to the forest just outside the town, where Musgrave had been dug by Jewish prisoners. Men, women, and children were made to march from the town and were then shot into this pit. In the following weeks, groups of 500 Jews were taken twice weekly to the forest for execution. Shulam's letters now chronicle his descent into despair. In late October 1941, he wrote, "Life is a struggle now. The times have become so difficult. We only have one wish, that God will give us and all the good people food so that we can survive. The synagogue is ablaze today. It is terrible to live at such times. Many people have left Colombia." This last sentence is a reference to the many people who had now been murdered. By the end of the year, food was very scarce, and there were many cases of starvation, disease, and frequent epidemics. In March 1942, the remaining 17,000 Jews still alive in Colombia, including Shulam, his sister, and her family, were moved into the ghettos. Shortly afterwards, Esther's daughter, Simma, aged 20, wrote to her grandmother in Berlin. In this photograph taken in 1934, Simma is on the right with my mother on the left. Simma wrote, "The situation is very difficult. We are all in need in the ghetto. We are here today, but tomorrow it could all be over for us. It's no longer cold here. Everybody is just hungry. My father has been ill for 8 months. Mother is not well and I cannot help her. I haven't got anything to give her to eat. 40 to 50 Jews died every day from starvation." Between March and September 1942, 13,000 Jews were transported by train from Colombia to Belzec, one of the 3 killing centres that had begun to operate. In early October 1942, the Colombia ghetto was surrounded. Out of 4,400 Jews left alive, only 240 labourers were selected. All the others were transported to Belzec. Shulam was one of the 240 workers. He was transported to a small town and from there wrote to Frida, his wife, on the 29th of October, 1942. "If it's possible, please send me some old things. 2 winter shirts, some old shoes, socks, handkerchiefs, a towel, some old trousers, because I haven't got anything to wear at the moment. Esther and the children aren't here anymore, as well as a few others. I beg you to see that I am helped." Shulam's sister Esther, her husband Moses, and their 4 children, Lieb, Chaim, Ephraim, and Simma, all died between April and October 1942. I don't know if they died of starvation or disease, or if they were shot into a mass grave or transported to Belzec. Shulam was shot into a mass grave on the 5th of June, 1943. At the end of World War II, only 200 Jews from Colombia had survived. Of the 60,000 Jews murdered, about 2/3 were killed in Colombia, and 1/3 were sent to Belzec extermination camp. A whole population and culture was destroyed. So within 3 years, all of Shulam's immediate family, about 35 men, women, and children, had been murdered, as well as his sister Esther and her family. This included his first cousins Mina, Esther, Don, and Yuda, their husbands and their children, all shown in these photographs of them in happier times. Only one member of the family who lived in Poland survived the Holocaust. This was Szymon Schnabel, Shulam's brother and my great uncle. He was taken prisoner by the Russians when they left Colombia in June 1942. Somehow he survived, and at the end of 1944, made it back to Colombia to search for his wife, Rosa, and sons, Jakob and Leib. They had all been murdered. In the Colombia Memorial book, which is written by survivors, there is an eyewitness account by Louisa Borton, who returned to Colombia in September 1944. She describes arriving in the town after an exhausting journey of 2 weeks of cold and misery, sitting in open boxcars. She describes the destruction of the town and meeting Christians, former good friends, who told her that there were no Jews left. But then, she writes, near the ruined marketplace, we found a Jew. The Jew showed us the house where Jews lived now. Mr. Schnabel greeted us heartily. The dwelling consisted of 1 room and a kitchen. A few people were there already. For the first time, we sat at a warm stove, warm out and shivering with cold after our day's experiences. We were 5 people sleeping on a straw sack on the ground, satisfied that we were in a Jewish house amongst Jewish people. Every day, several people came back, believing that they might find someone from their family who was still alive. All of them arrived ragged, hungry, and without money. All of them were miserable and did not know how to begin again. The Mr. Schnabel she refers to was my great uncle Shimon. Shimon emigrated to Israel in 1949. There he married again to a woman who survived the Budapest ghetto. She had children, and today I am in contact with her grandson, who is in his 70s. And what a Frida! She survived the Second World War in Berlin, though her mental and physical health never recovered. She eventually received compensation as the victim of Nazi persecution. She died in June 1973. My mother had a good life. Her foster family treated her like their daughter. She married and had 6 children, of whom I am the youngest. She named her eldest son Shimon. Her uncle Shimon kept in contact with her, and in 1967 sent her this photograph of his sister, Esther, himself, and my mother, taken in Colombia before the Holocaust. Written on the back is, "Dearest Clara, for our ever lonely life." Why have I chosen to tell my family's story? Holocaust Memorial Day is a day to remember the 6 million Jewish victims, as well as the non-Jewish victims, or who were murdered or whose lives were changed forever. The Holocaust began slowly from centuries-old prejudice, which led to discrimination, which led to persecution, which led to mass murder. This process is still happening today in many parts of the world against many religions and people. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be bystanders. Prejudice and the language of hatred must be challenged by us all. Through choosing to remember and through the act of remembrance, we can understand the experience of today's refugees and support their needs in the same way that my mother was helped, so they can rebuild their lives.
Thank you to Christina for sharing your incredibly moving story of your family, and also for the photographs. I think that really has brought that period of history to life for us. I'd also like to say thank you to Nick Jovchik Sass, and the local band, Ninoshka, for the beautiful music that we heard following the end of Christina's testimony. Nick, would you like to tell us a little bit about that piece?
Yes, certainly. The song I just played is a place of traditional Klezmer music. Klezmer is the traditional music of Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe. And it's a very, I think it's very, very much encapsulates the spirit, I think, of Jewish culture, in particular in that through much Jewish history in Eastern Europe, it wasn't allowed to speak Yiddish or Hebrew. So a lot of Klezmer is actually instrumental, and violin is one of the main instruments of Klezmer because it's said to imitate the voice of a woman. So in these pieces, like the one I just played, I think it's very clear to hear so much words that can't be said in times of oppression and hardship that range from sorrow, but also joy and passion. And I wanted to play that particular Freilachs because I feel it has a whole mixture of emotions that really encapsulates Jewish culture and identity.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'd now like to invite a number of special invited guests to light a candle of remembrance. For this section, you might find it useful to change your settings on Zoom to gallery view if you're able to, and you may also wish to join us by lighting a candle of your own at home. First, I would like to invite Dr. Iris Siegel to light a candle on behalf of the Jewish community to remember the 6 million Jews murdered during the Holocaust. I invite Jane O'Hara from the Bath Baha'i community to light a candle to remember all those who still face persecution today because of their religion or belief. Thank you. I now would like to ask Linda Lloyd to light a candle to remember all disabled people who were targeted by the Nazi regime and those who have experienced hate crimes in more recent times. Okay, I'll let Linda light that in her own time. I now would like to ask Nick to light a candle to remember all the lesbian and gay people who were targeted by the Nazi regime and all LGBTQ+ members of our society that currently experience prejudice and hate because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. I would now like to invite Habib Wardak and Mariam Wardak to light a candle on behalf of all refugees from Afghanistan and other places who have been forced to flee their homes and seek refuge elsewhere. We welcome refugees in Bath and North East Somerset. I would now like to ask you all to pause for a moment's reflection and, if you wish, to light a candle of your own. Okay. I would now like to ask Anne Cullis to read us a special poem.
This poem is by a Jewish American poet called Anthony Hecht, who was born in 1923 and died in 2004. The poem continues our theme this evening, One Day. As a very young man in the US Army, his division helped liberate the Flossenburg concentration camp in April 1945. Hecht was ordered to interview French prisoners in the hope of gathering evidence on the camp commanders. Years later, Hecht said of this experience, "The place, the suffering, the prisoners' accounts were beyond comprehension. For years after, I would wake shrieking." This poem starts with 2 lines in German, which I'll read, and it's a quote from a Nazi law. The German translates as, "We have a law, and according to the law, he must die." The Book of Yolek by Anthony Hecht. Wir haben ein Gesetz, und nach dem Gesetz soll er sterben. The doused coals fume and hiss after your meal of grilled brook trout, and you saunter off for a walk down the fern trail. Doesn't matter where to, just so you're weeks and worlds away from home, and among midsummer hills have set up camp in the deep bronze glories of declining day. You remember peacefully an earlier day in childhood. Remember a quite specific meal, a corn roast and bonfire in summer camp. That summer, you got lost on a nature walk. More than you dared admit you thought of home. No one else knows where the mind wanders to. The 5th of August, 1942. It was the morning and very hot. It was the day they came at dawn with rifles to the home for Jewish children, cutting short the meal of bread and soup, lining them up to walk in close formation off to a special camp. How often you have thought about that camp, as though in some strange way you were driven to, and about the children and how they were made to walk. Jolek, who had bad lungs, who wasn't a day over 5 years old, commanded to leave his meal and shamble between armed guards to his long home. We're approaching August again. It will drive home the regulation torments of that camp Jolek was sent to, his small, unfinished meal, the electric fences, the numeral tattoo, the quite extraordinary heat of the day they were all forced to take that terrible walk. Whether on a silent, solitary walk or among crowds, far off or safe at home, you will remember helplessly that day and the smell of smoke and the loudspeakers of the camp. Wherever you are, Jolek will be there too. His unuttered name will interrupt your meal. Prepare to receive him in your home someday. Though they killed him in the camp they sent him to, you'll walk in as you're sitting down to a meal.
Don't look for me where birds are singing. You will not find me there, my chance. At the machines where lives are withered, dort ist mein Ruheplatz. Dort ist mein Ruheplatz. Don't look for me where leaves are springing. You will not find me there, mein Schatz. I am a slave where chains are ringing. Dort ist mein Ruheplatz. Dort ist mein Ruheplatz. Nicht such mich hoch, die Vögel singen, du findest mich dort nicht, mein Schatz. Ich glaub bin ich, wo Ketten klingen, dort ist mein Ruheplatz, dort ist mein Ruheplatz. if indeed you love me truly, come to me, mein lieber Schatz. Lift my heavy heart from sorrow, oh make it sweet, my resting place. Make it sweet, mein Ruheplatz.
Thank you, Nick. That was beautiful. Can you tell me a little bit about that piece of music, please?
Yes, so that song, Mein Ruheplatz, which means my resting place, is actually written before the Holocaust and was written by a Jewish poet in New York about a tragedy called the Triangle Factory Fire that happened in 1911. It happened in a garment factory where most of the workers there were Jewish girls between the ages of 14 and 18. And the factory managers used to lock the doors to stop people from taking breaks, and basically the factory set fire, and obviously most of the people died in that fire. And the reason I want to choose that song, not only because I think it speaks to the it's a song that conveys sadness and tragedy and loss, but also because I think it reminds us that I don't think it's quite as simple as, obviously there were terrible things that happened in Germany, but also in the US, you know, and I've been asked to light a candle on behalf of the LGBT community today. And obviously there was persecution of LGBT people in Nazi Germany, but also in all of the Allied countries as well, it was still a criminal offense. Homosexuality was a criminal offense, and many LGBT Holocaust survivors then ended up being put in prison after the Holocaust because it was still criminalized in those countries. So I wanted to play that song because I think it's a kind of reminder that we should be looking for oppression and hatred in our own communities, both in the past, and to be vigilant against hatred today in the present as well.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for that reminder too. I'd like now to say thank you to everybody who has shared their testimony, for the speeches, the poems, and the music. I would also like to thank our candle lighters, and also you too for taking part in today's Holocaust Memorial Day event. If you would like to give us any feedback, then the details to do so will be on the slide that follows. But in the meantime, can I say thank you once more for coming together to remember and to reflect. We hope that this time next year we will be able to run our Holocaust Memorial Day as a face-to-face event. So thank you and good night.